Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Words on Whiskey, brought to you by Irish Whiskey Magazine. And this evening, we have quite a different format to what we might normally have. We've got a kind of Q&A and a kind of fact-finding and a delve into what's happening in the Irish whiskey sector at the moment and what's trending, what's hot, what's not, and what it means for the consumer mostly. So obviously, there are so many changes going on at the moment that it's becoming difficult to keep track of everything and what does it mean. So a few things first, I suppose. We've had a competition running during the week, and for a fabulous prize of the new Method and Madness Mulberry wood finished pot still Irish whiskey. And the box is here behind me, and it's I suppose a presentation box, promotional box that is something that's not very easy to come by. So look, we're going to do the draw for that at the beginning of the show as well. So if you've entered, best of luck. And other than that, let's invite our guest, who should be well known to many here. So let's bring him in. Mark, good evening.
Hello, Sergius. How are you?
You're very welcome. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm not too bad now. I'm not too bad.
Good.
Nearly missed the deadline, of course, always running late, but
no, you're good. You're good. I know I could rely on you. So of course, you're out in Galway at the moment, your new home. You've been there a couple of months. So how are you finding it out there?
It's great. I'm living out in a place in Connemara. It's actually the first town in Connemara. If you go out the coast road, it's called Furbo,
Right.
or Furbaha. So I'm only less than a kilometre from the ocean, and it's actually quite like where I come from in Donegal here. So it's been it's nice to be, especially during all these lockdowns and stuff. It's nice to be so close to the sea.
Yes.
And to the kind of fresh air and stuff. It's invaluable. So it's good. It's nice to be back in Galway.
Yeah, you're settled in there and everything is good.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I started a new job, which we'll talk about later. I'm 4 months into that with Distillery here in Galway, so it's nice to be back working on the kind of brand side of things. But I spent 5 years in Galway. I went to university in Galway, and then I was in Dublin for 6 years. And coming back, I was doing a bit of consultancy last year in Garavan's Bar here in Galway, where I actually worked in my early 20s. And that really, for myself and Orla, my fiance, it really kind of put, I suppose, the perspective of living in Dublin compared to living elsewhere became very relevant. And then the joy of being away from the hustle and bustle of Dublin is very evident. Now that's a picture actually of 5 minutes from my house in Donegal.
So you're from Inishowen?
Yeah, Inishowen, the peninsula, the Poaching Republic.
Absolutely.
As many would remember it, 888 illicit stills of Inishowen. I come from a very small place called the Isle of Doe. I actually grew up in the town, but these have all been taken around the Isle. Some people might, if they're into kind of Irish tourism, there's a Doe famine village there, which is an incredibly popular tourist destination, which goes through kind of life in Ireland from the 1800s up to now. And also the Ballyliffin Golf Club is less than 5 minutes from there as well, which is hosted the Irish Open 2 years ago, which is probably one of the best links courses in Europe. But yeah, that's the castles there. That's only 5 minutes from my house. So as you can see, the scenery is
stunning. Really is stunning.
And I suppose the tranquility up there when the wind's not blowing is amazing. But it's very like always. It tends to rain a lot and does be quite windy. But it's a great place to come from. I moved out to the seaside when I was 12, so I spent my teenage years there, which was great. Great place.
Well, they say when you're out in the west and you're looking over the Atlantic and you can't see the islands, it means it's raining. And if you can't see them, it means it's going to rain.
It's funny up there, like looking out where that picture was taken. Next stop's America, so you're very much at the extremes of Ireland, which is great.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, it seems like you've been on the whiskey scene for a very long time, Mark. Before you actually got into it, what were you doing before that?
So I was one of the, I suppose, the lucky few, Serge, that I suppose I don't know anybody younger than me or within a few years younger than me that actually started working, at kind of 12 or 13.
Right.
So I feel like I'm at the end of that generation, and obviously you'll know yourself growing up in and around Ireland. A lot of people tend to get a job in their very very early teens,
Yeah.
if not slightly before that. They might have been working on a farm, or they might have been working in a shop. Now I actually got straight into hospitality, so I worked in a kitchen. My first job was in a kitchen in a restaurant called Tulnaree, and the guy actually who I was working for, his name's Kieran Dewey. He's actually done very well for himself with a business called Nancy's Barn, and he's got a world famous chowder up there. But he was the first guy I ever worked for. But I was only 12 or 13 then, and I worked there for a couple of months. And I got to go to America then for a summer. It was actually the year I was 13, turning 14, and I went to America for a summer, and I was working over there for a guy plastering, a very close family friend, a guy called Kevin Brett, and his mother and father would have looked after me when I was very young, and both my parents were working, so they were our childminders. So we spent our days, our kind of evenings there, or our mornings there before our parents would drop us off, and they had 4 sons. So I went to America to see one of them. Then when I came back, I worked actually in the golf club. So I worked in the kitchen there as a pot scrubber, and then eventually I was cooking with a guy called Paul McDade until I went to Galway to college at 18. But I'd always been fascinated by kind of bar work and working behind the bar. So the last summer I was in the golf club, I asked could I do some shifts in the bar there as well, just to learn to pull pints.
Yeah.
And I learned there with a guy called Desi Riley, which was great. And then I went to Galway, and my first job in Galway was actually glass collecting in the Keys bar. I think anybody that's been to Galway would have been to the Keys.
Yeah.
And I worked there throughout my degree, and probably.
What did you study, Mark?
I studied English and maths, so I wanted to be a teacher, a secondary school teacher, and I wanted to teach English and maths. And NUI Galway was the only university in the country that you could do English and maths together.
Right.
And very strange, I suppose, duo in that, people that tend to be good at English don't tend to be good at maths. And I certainly was one of those people. I was good at English, but I wasn't good at maths.
Yeah.
But I did my degree, and I got second class honors, but I didn't do well enough to get my dip.
Right.
So to become a teacher. So at that stage, I actually started working in Garavans in Galway, and that was my first experience with whiskey. So I had a lot of, I had a good 6 years working kind of in hospitality and kitchens and stuff before I even hit Garavans when I turned 20. I suppose that really, at that stage, I had already developed a good work ethic and a kind of good, I suppose, sturdy head, and I'm very, very much willing and able to work. And then I just happened to kind of fall into whiskey and Garavans, which is great.
Yeah. And then from there, was it Celtic Whiskey Shop?
Yeah, so Garavans, I suppose, is where the whiskey thing started. When I joined Garavans, they had 50 whiskies behind the bar, and I'm sure if anybody's been there since, you'll know that there's a lot more. So they've about 175 or 200 on display. They've about 150 by the measure. So that collection was being curated as I was there, and Paul Garavan, who I still keep in touch with and I still do things for every now and again. He didn't work in the bar. He owned the bar. It was his family's pub. But he curated the collection, and he used to have calls on a kind of Tuesday, Wednesday night. He had some business in America, and he used to have late night kind of conference calls. And after the conference calls would end, I would generally be cleaning the bar, and he would bring down whatever he had purchased for the collection that week. Nice. So then he started telling me about the whiskies, and he didn't really drink whiskey at the time, but he was fascinated by Irish whiskey and the whiskey industry. And obviously at this stage, this must have been 2012, 2013. So the Renaissance was just about starting. Dingle was distilling, but it was just kind of starting to. There was clearly a spark there, and he was telling me about the whiskies, and I was kind of learning about them. And then it was actually your guest last week, Seamus Lowry. Seamus did a training with us. It was around the launch of Yellow Spot and Redbreast 21, and he came in and he did a tasting. We were the kind of leading whiskey bar in Galway, maybe aside from Noctons at the time. And he came in to do a little bit of training with the staff, and it was tasting Redbreast 21 was the game changer for me. I was blown away. I had drank whiskey before that, and I had tried a lot of the regulars, Redbreast 12, Green Spot. I tried some of the Napogues, which were around that time. I tried some of the Bushmills, but Redbreast 21 was the first time where I was like just absolutely blown away, and every time I've tried it since, it blows me away. That the way Seamus kind of delivered the training and stuff, that kind of set me on my trajectory. So trying to cut a long story short, I went from there to the Celtic Whiskey Shop, which was amazing, working for Ali, and we had a really strong whiskey team in there at the time. I was working along with Stephen McGuinness, who's global sales manager with Dunvilles now in Ecklandville. I was working with James Scales, who still works on and off with the Celtic Whiskey Shop. Emmett Murphy, who was with Neffen for a while there. I think he's a free agent at the minute. And we had myself, so that was the four of us. And I'd worked with a guy called Derek Pierce, who I was replacing. But I'm sure you remember all those lads from
remember
Celtic.
them. I remember them, unfortunately. Yeah.
And Ali had this very much, he wanted his staff to be experts, and he wanted us to be experts. So he was very pro tasting everything. So anything new that came in, he would always allow us to open a bottle. He encouraged us to do the kind of WSET exams, which we did. We learned an awful lot about wine in there, which has stood to us in the long run, and actually an awful lot about fortified wine, which, as you know from the whiskey industry, is invaluable knowledge. And it was great. I left after just under 2 years, and to be honest, it was kind of a mistake. I was probably over ambitious. And there's no probably. I was over ambitious. I was looking to kind of, make a name for myself in the whiskey industry, and a job came up with Bushmills, and I went for it, and I got it. And I did my probation there. Seamus was just after joining, but I did the probation. I wasn't ready. I just knew it wasn't for me. I wasn't ready to be, kind of out there on your own all the time, trying to knocking on doors. And Bushmills wasn't really in a good place at the time. So I made a mistake there, and I probably should have stayed in Celtic for a lot longer, because the knowledge we gained there was invaluable.
Well, I think anybody going into that shop, always learned. I mean, I used to like going in just chatting to you guys. I was probably your worst customer, but I used to take a lot of your time.
You still are. Never a great man for spending money.
No.
I suppose anybody that was kind of into collecting whiskey and stuff at that time, they knew the four of us, and Stephen was very good with everybody at that time, and still is, in terms of his knowledge of kind of collecting Irish whiskey and the value of Irish whiskey, and how to move it on as well. And we kind of knew everybody that was into whiskey, and anybody that was involved with the Irish Whiskey Society, and many, many more. And it kind of grew from there. And I actually went on the road for Ali and started kind of selling to the whiskey bars that were starting to pop up around Ireland. So I got to know the likes of Finn and Dick Max when him and Peter White were kind of starting the whiskey down there. I met Philip Gillivan and Mark Lonergan. I actually sold them their first kind of full collection into the Shelburne Bar in Cork. When I first went there, they had about 20 whiskies, and
a lot more than that now.
After I think their first order was 117 bottles. Different SKUs, so they had just made a decision that they were going for it, and they went hard. I got to meet people like Johnny Barron through Willie Murphy down in the Sky and the Ground, and met Jim Gordon and Revolution, and we kind of got anybody that was kind of into whiskey, Conor Ryan and the Folk House, we kind of knew, which was great. After I did the Bushmills thing, I bounced about then for a little while. I was in Mitchell and Sons, which was absolutely amazing. I got to work with Peter Dunn there, and got to kind of interact with Irish distillers around the spot, the kind of future of the spot whiskies. Red Spot was just in development at that time, and it was amazing to be kind of involved and see the history there. And sheerly for money alone, I left there. Money's always a big thing in Dublin. It's very hard to live in Dublin on a low wage. So I went to El Mulligan Whiskey Shop, and I was there for their kind of first year with Koch and Michael Lawler and Michael Fogarty, and that was good. But I suppose I was lucky. I kind of had enough of retail at that stage, and I got headhunted by a recruitment company, and was lucky to get a job with High Spirits in Ireland, and that was. So
amazing. They were supplying. Paddy was their big Irish whiskey.
They had just taken Paddy Irish whiskey. They had the Buffalo Trace portfolio, which was amazing, Southern Comfort. So I got a real education there in terms of Buffalo Trace. I got to travel to America to help relaunch Paddy over there, and I learned an awful lot. George Roberts, who's the head of High Spirits in Ireland, and Siobhan Costello, who's the marketing manager there. They're part of the leadership team. Working with the two of them was absolutely incredible, and they have a great wider team as well. The lads like Paul Ollie Ryan's probably the best salesman that Ireland's ever seen. Michael Cowman joined after. He seems to be doing very well there. But Ian Doug, another guy working down the southeast, Dougie's amazing. His bourbon knowledge is incredible. It was great to work for them. And I went to the Chalk Group after that again, kind of headhunted back into hospitality, and then COVID hit. So that was that.
I remember you made a post. I remember that really hit with a lot of people. About losing your work at the time, and for anybody losing their job, it was devastating. But
and I had a few posts. I used LinkedIn kind of quite well at that time, and LinkedIn's invaluable to anybody looking for a job, or anybody that wants to make a name for themselves in a certain industry. If that industry kind of converses on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn. I didn't lie idle. I started working on an Irish whiskey book, which is still in development, and I took on some project work with the Irish Whiskey Association, and then with a few distilleries as well. And I didn't talk about exactly what I was doing, but I talked about getting the head down, getting to the grind, and kind of working as best you can, and really kind of pushing yourself to strive and do better. And I was very lucky that I got into the Irish whiskey when I was very young, and I had kind of put myself in a position where I was quite well known, and I know a lot of people within the industry, but I had made a lot of mistakes probably through the years, kind of through that over ambition. And I always thought by this stage, I'd be running the country and running Irish whiskey, but
still
I made a few bad calls, and I really had to work. And anybody that knows me personally will know that I worked quite hard to kind of redevelop myself, and I suppose make a positive impact is all I ever want to make. Now it's kind of standing to me, which is great.
Yeah, well, I think your resilience has really been evident, from the posts and your career development, and of course. You're now head of marketing at Mickle Distillery out in Galway. Which must be very exciting for you.
Well, it's amazing, and I suppose a bit of good news over the past couple of weeks. The lads in Mickle, Porrick and Jimmy, the two brothers, have laid down the first whiskey in Galway in over 100 years, which is fantastic. They're really reclaiming kind of Galway's distilling heritage. As Ross, who's Porrick's business partner, would say, there was two great distilling traditions in Galway. There was the city distilling. There was up to 22 distilleries in Galway in the early 1800s. It was a pot still kind of proud city, and it was 1700s it was Ireland's kind of most prosperous port, and because of that there was a thriving distilling industry. But there was always behind that there was the Connemara potching distilling, and the Connemara potching distilling never stopped. It stayed going the whole way through, and Porrick's sixth generation potching distiller, he fired the stills on the land back in Connemara before he actually brought it to fruition as a legal distillery in Salt Hill. And now to be making a dream come true by making whiskey in Galway again is just phenomenal. And the guys brought me in. I did a little bit of work for them, and they seen it was kind of a skill set. The guys are very much distillers, and they're distillers through and through. Like it's in their DNA, but they never really specialized in whiskey, and they didn't have anybody that kind of had that specialist knowledge.
Sure.
So I kind of filled a big void there, and I very much I was trying to take my time and looking at roles and hoping to get a good one. And I very much wanted to get a role where I could be involved in kind of the brand strategy and, the consumer engagement and very much kind of marketing, much more so than sales, because a lot of what I had done before was sales. But it just kind of suited. Right now I wear an awful lot of hats. We kind of have to. We're such a small company. We're all, working on many different things at all stages. But
well, look, obviously the pinnacle of your career really, I guess, is that you're a published author or you shall be a published author in the next edition of Irish Whiskey Magazine.
Of course.
2 weeks. So you wrote a very, I've seen the full piece, so you've written a very interesting, insightful piece on independent bottlers, which is obviously a very topical thing at the moment, and we'll get to talk about that later when we talk about trends. But I'm looking forward to sharing that with our readers, so that should be interesting.
Yeah, and Mickle will be releasing some independent bottlings this summer now, which is great, and I suppose finding the right part of my job is finding the right way to, kind of tell our independent bottling story. Everything that the lads have produced to date has been distilled by themselves. So independent bottling kind of goes against what they are. But and transparent.
Yeah. Well, of course, you've done a good bit of consultancy as well. Sorry, you've done a good bit of consultancy as well with the Irish Whiskey Association now as well, helping develop their offering and the content in terms of cocktails and, showing the versatility of Irish whiskey. How was that?
That was amazing. The Irish Whiskey Association, I suppose, I was approached to give an opinion on a kind of cocktail development program that they were working on, and Siobhan Costello was heavily involved with in High Spirits. And I just kind of, me being me, I gave a kind of hefty opinion. And then they asked me would I want to get involved, so I got involved, and that's now come to fruition in their Discover Irish Whiskey program about the depth and diversity of Irish whiskey. So we have a cocktail program there. There's also a food pairing program coming down the line, and I'm actually a committee member now in the Trade and Promotion Committee, and we're currently discussing strategies to I suppose support the on trade in Ireland, but also give the distilleries. There's now 48 member distilleries in the Irish Whiskey Association, so give the members, whether they be bonders or bottlers or whether they be distilleries, the best opportunity to engage with consumers. So and also to support the trade. Once the Irish on trade opens up, we hope to be able to support them in a kind of very unique way. So that's that. Anyway, enough about me. I suppose we're supposed to be talking about trends, aren't we?
Well, before we start that, obviously we have the competition running during the week, and what we're going to do is we're going to take the draw live now. And as I said, it's for that amazing pack, the presentation pack of the Mulberry Wood. And we'll talk about unusual woods, I suppose, as part of the trends. But what I'd like you to do, Mark, let me share my screen and see if I can do this. Let me see. I don't know if it'll let me. I think it will. Okay. Yes. Okay, so I can share my spreadsheet here. So I have a spreadsheet here with all the entries from Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And basically what I've done is I put a random number in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort them by this random number. And whatever line number you call will be the one that the person that is a winner.
Cool.
So if you can give me, I'm going to refresh these random numbers just in case anybody thinks we've been doing didgeridoo pokery or anything. So what I'd ask you is if you can give me a random number between 2 and 645.
645, 2 and 645. Why don't we go for 157?
157. Okay, so let me refresh these cells here with the random number. Okay, and I will copy those down. Let me see if I can do that right. There are easier ways to do this, I'm sure, and I will sort them by that random number. So how do we do that? Home. And let me see, how do you sort these? Bear with me, everybody. 25 years of IT was useful. And okay, I have it here. Bear with me. Okay, so sort. And we're going to...
Say if you just press Control F and go 157, it'll bring you to it.
Well, no, because I have to go by row number. I have to sort the rows first. So I'm going to sort A to Z. And I'm going to sort by random number. So I better get the sort right. Hold on. So, okay, apologies. I'm going to sort by the random number. Okay, and whatever's in row 155. So good luck, everybody.
157, 157.
Oh, 157. We better get that right. Who knows? So we had a huge amount of retail. So C. McLaughlin, I have no idea, on Instagram. is the winner. So congratulations. I'm not sure what the name is behind that, but C. McMahon is the name. So congratulations, and we'll be in touch with that. And congratulations on winning that fabulous prize. So look, let's get back to business and talk about what we're going to talk about. So if anybody has any questions, please do drop them in the chat, and we'll answer them, or Mark will answer them. I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit, Mark, with you maybe on some of these questions. But what we're talking about is trending. What's trending in Irish whiskey? So I suppose first let's kick off with the number of distilleries and the growth of Irish whiskey. What are your comments on that, and what do you see behind that growth, and do you see it as being sustainable?
Yeah, obviously the growth is tremendous. We're up to 38 or 39 working distilleries now, which is amazing. I don't know how many distilleries have product on the market. I'm sure it's still less than 10. But I don't think anybody could have kind of predicted it, 10 years ago. But I suppose it's great to see. It's good. There's a tremendous amount of I suppose loyalty and support for Irish whiskey industry now, and the markets that are, I suppose, inviting Irish whiskey industry in are giving more and more opportunities to the trade, and the growth has been tremendous. But that growth has been driven by Jameson alone, and kind of fair play to them, and Tullamore Dew now to a slightly lesser extent, but very much driving that. So the percentage of the actual global sales that's available to small brands, it's small but growing. So is it sustainable, I suppose, was the kind of question. I think it is, because the more and more we grow, the more and more opportunities there is out there. But there has to be an element of certain brands, I suppose, there has to be small brands and big brands. There has to be certain distilleries that are happy to kind of be a smaller distillery, and happy to be maybe craft, or happy to work in kind of a niche role or a niche market, because there's no competing with the big boys as far as I'm concerned. And you have to kind of win your shelf space where you can, but you're very much fighting for brand advocates. You're fighting to kind of resonate with as many people as you can, and hope that more and more people will come back to your brand and your whiskey. But I do think we're at a stage now where I do think it's sustainable. Possibly not everybody will survive, but I think there's still kind of 20 odd more distilleries to come. I think once we start getting over the 50 and up into the 60, we're a very, very small country, and it's going to be hard to sustain from there. But I think that kind of answers the question. Yeah.
So Marcus there asked the question: does the global market understand Irish whiskey, and are we telling the right story?
I think the global market, it doesn't understands whiskey, understands that there are Irish whiskies, but doesn't understand, I suppose, the breadth and diversity that there is in Irish whiskey. Like, if you think the most understood term, I think, in whiskey is single malt. Single malt is synonymous with quality. No matter where you go in the world, if you say the two words single malt, people will associate it with whiskey. Now, sadly, they'll generally associate it with Scotch. And now that's because of the good job that Scotch whiskey industry has done since the early 1980s, late 70s, early 80s, creating the kind of single malt category. But, the majority of whiskey sold in the world is blends. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, especially, kind of purists. And, blended whiskeys are generally misunderstood by a whole. Nobody ever really knows what goes into them. But it creates a kind of standard. And, when you look at products like Jameson, say like Johnny Walker and Scotch, they almost elevate themselves above their own category. So there's an awful lot of work to be done within Irish whiskey. And I think single malt's a very strong proposition, and Bushmills kind of have, they've the maturity, and they have the aged stock, and they have the portfolio where they can kind of very much grow the single malt space. But there's Tyrconnell's done a lot of good things in the last few years with some of their more premium releases, and then you have independent bottlers like Dunville's coming through with amazing single malts, the W.D. O'Connell and say the Bonding, but single malt's much easier for people to understand. The problem, I think, in Irish whiskey, and it's the problem, but it's also the biggest opportunity, is single pot still, and that's where we have an opportunity to be unique in that it's a category that we can kind of own ourselves. There is a GA around it, but it's a much, much harder sell because, trying to explain to people what a mixed mash is and trying to explain, malted and unmalted barley and it's creamy and it's spicy and, this is unique to Ireland. It's an awful lot for people to digest. So the answer to Marcus' question is probably, I don't think it is globally understood. We've an awful lot of work to do there, but I do think consumers around the world in certain areas, so say America, Russia, mainland kind of Europe, we've a lot of work to do in Asia. But in those kind of bigger areas, they understand that Irish whiskey is certainly a category that's growing, and that'll incite intrigue, which will help.
Yeah. Now, one of the things you mentioned there, actually, which I caught an earful of, was you mentioned the craft distillery movement, and there is obviously a movement that is called craft. For a start, can we define what a craft distillery is? I mean, does being small make you a craft distillery, or can you be a craft distillery if you're large? And what does it mean? I mean, everything's craft these days. Is it a term that's becoming overused?
Yeah, I think it's a bit ambiguous. It has been overused, and it's a hard one. People say, I think Teeling had a thing there last night, crafted to create, and we're a craft distillery, and who is craft? It's a very hard question. I like Mickle's a great example. You use Mickle. We have one still. Every mash is done by hand.
Mm-hmm.
The grain is poured in by hand. It's turned by hand. It's in a tiny little mash tun, about the size of a big man.
Yeah.
And our fermenters are tiny. Our still's a 500-liter still. If you've seen the 250-liter still that they were using before, when you think about craft, that's what people kind of tend to think about when they think about craft. But then you have bigger distilleries that claim to kind of be craft when they can produce, 200,000 LPA a year or, up to 500,000 LPA.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean,
I don't think it's a word that you can really own, and it is ambiguous. I like the word in terms of, I have a lot of passion for the craft that is making Irish whiskey, and the kind of the tendency, the relationship that Irish whiskey has with the land and with the people that are involved in making it. And even though some of the bigger distilleries now are quite, technologically advanced and stuff, there's still always people at the heart of it. And I think there's an element of craft and craftsmanship to the Irish whiskey industry, which we'll never lose. But craft as a word, I'm very comfortable saying Mickle's a craft distillery. Kilowood Distillery is a craft distillery. But there's it's still, is it something that you want associated with your brand? I don't think so at the minute. I think it's a hard one to kind of grasp.
Well, there's James, and James is saying it's based on size, but I'd argue quite strongly that being large doesn't mean you don't have craftsmanship. I mean, and that's
exactly
a misnomer that's been sent out there. So the quality of whiskies from the big players, from the IDLs, from the Tullamore's, from the Bushmills, they have every element of craftsmanship within their distilleries as the ones that are labeling themselves craft as well.
Yeah, and I think that there's a very strong proposition there, and James is actually a really good example of somebody that celebrates the people within his business. And he's across their socials and across their I suppose their strategy, their kind of marketing strategy, they're very focused on the people involved, and they've a great and they're creating jobs and they're growing jobs, and there's a huge amount about that kind of craftsmanship, and I'm sure that will continue as the new distillery gets built in Ardra. And like me as a Donegal man, I have huge passion for their brand, for their company, and for what they're doing in Donegal, especially in rural Donegal, which is amazing. But yeah, 500,000 LPA craft. Yeah, I'll give it to him. He's a lot smaller than other people, but because and the reason I'll give it to him is because he very much celebrates, the craft the craftsmanship that's involved in his brands. You look at it, and Dulemon gin and the way they create it, and going out and picking the seaweed, and the little small distillery that they have there that Moira runs, and they create a truly craft product. It's an absolutely outstanding product. And then they have their independently bottled whiskies, which are inspired by, as with most of their brands, are inspired by Irish mythology. But it's a really, really kind of cool concept. So I'll give it to him.
Yeah. Sorry, there's a question in here from Paul O'Kane from Belfast Whiskey. He's wondering, will you be still writing for Malt Review?
Well, to be honest, nobody from Malt Review has got in contact, so I'm not sure. I know Jason and Phil have left, and to be honest, it was Phil that invited me on board, and Jason that gracefully accepted me. So I've no intention, really. But if they reach out, who knows? I've nothing. I think it's a shame that the lads have left Malt, but I've absolutely no doubt that they'll do something more with it. And Jason's posted a lot of kind of cool stuff back on his Whiskey Rover page, which is over 14,000 followers on Instagram, and he's one of the best writers out there. And Phil's a bit like Marmite. I think some people love him, some people hate him, but Phil's true to himself.
Well, look, I love Phil's honesty and transparency and his ethics.
Phil's true to himself, and he's true to his own palate, and he gives his own opinion. And there's a lot of that whole malt thing. There's a lot of kind of, I suppose, people have opinions and people are, talking about it. And, even when Phil puts up reviews, a lot of people kind of take the mick about him being cantankerous or whatever. But at the end of the day, he was only ever putting an opinion out there. So if Jason and Phil decide to do something together in the future, I'm 100% on board.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so look, let's hit one of the trends that's emerging now, and I'm sure this will fall nicely into what James talked about there. Let's talk about peated whiskey. All right, so great. If we go back, we had Connemara, we had some sprinklings of Hewitt, we even had a bottle of Inishowen from where you're from. But other than that, it was a very dormant market. And actually, what I'm drinking at the moment, I'm drinking a Black Pitts, which is one of my tipples these days.
So peated, So what do you think? Is it a trend?
Is it a trend? We've gone to how many now have? The irony that hits me is we don't really have the capacity, or the resource, or the source of peated malt. I mean, there's a few very small maltsters producing peated malt, but most of it is coming over from Scotland. Let's face it.
And that's one of those things. How can there's a lot of people say how can you make Irish whiskey with malt from elsewhere? And it's one of those things that I suppose I'm very much not on the fence of, but like I see the reason. Like there wouldn't be Connemara without malt from Scotland, and when the harvests aren't good, it's good to be able to get it from elsewhere, and it's still crafted by Irish people. So I'm still a bit on the fence about that, and I'm not sure if I would like Irish whiskey to kind of move away from importation entirely. But I'm sure we'll talk about terroir at some point this evening. But I have a few opinions on that as well. But when it comes to peat, I think peated whiskey, when they released, the peated whiskies from Cooley initially, they did McGilligan and they did Inishowen, because Inishowen and McGilligan, which are two opposite peninsulas, one in Derry and one in Donegal, separated by a channel just at Greencastle, which Dave Mara would be able to tell you about. But they named a couple of whiskies after up there because Inishowen was synonymous with peat, and as was West Donegal, and Connemara and Galway. The potsheen makers always made peated spirit. Peated whiskey mightn't have been a big thing kind of post mid 1800s, but a lot of it would have been peated before that. There's no doubt that peated whiskey is going to be a thing in Ireland. We're very lucky that GND are producing absolutely fantastic peated spirit at the minute, which is we're seeing in brands like W.D. O'Connell, Bill Phil by Dahi O'Connell. Those whiskies are fantastic. I think he's had 4 releases so far, and they're really, really good. Straight bourbon matured peated whiskies. When
did this trend emerge? I mean, the first re-emergence I think I saw of peated Irish whiskey was obviously we had the Connemara, but post that, I think the first inkling I saw was the Dunville's 3 Crowns peated.
Well, the Teeling 21, which
Well,
was
they
the
had
vintage
it, yeah,
reserve,
yeah,
they had that had a slight hint of peat in there, and they were talking about 8 ppm possibly in the distillate, or in the final product, so a tiny amount. But Frank McCarty obviously had used some peated malt in his double distillations and Bushmills and those contract distillations that never really sold until Diageo moved them on to different brands. So that was there was a little hint of peat in there. Locks was lightly peated in Connemara, but obviously they were both from Cooley.
yeah.
And then we had Donville's Three Crowns peated, which was great. I don't think it's necessarily a trend just yet. I think we're just kind of pre the trend, but there's inklings, and I know I can let you know that us and Mickle, we're going to focus on peated whiskey.
Yeah.
It's very, potching was always made with peat, and it's very much part of who we are. And even today, we were in there making our peated potching, the heritage potching, and I was chewing on some peated oats this morning, which was amazing with Jimmy.
Yeah.
James and Sleeve League has committed to peated whiskey.
I think they're going to do peated only.
Yeah, apparently so, which is amazing, and
Yeah.
which is great because it's a very Donegal thing. And Neffin had talked about peated whiskey, but who knows if Neffin's actually going to happen now. I know Graham Cool has laid down some peated whiskey in Dingle, which is very exciting because Graham's an incredibly decorated distiller, and it's great to see him putting his mark stamper in there with some peated whiskey. Teeling have obviously released the Black Pits. I'll be honest, I'm not a massive fan of the Black Pits. I've tried it a few times now, and it's just not doing it for me. But I do think the category is going to diversify into peat, and it's going to be a diversification thing at first, but it's certainly a point of difference. And Irish whiskey needs as many points of difference as possible to kind of grasp as many people as possible.
Well, that's my other argument then. Are we basically throwing our net too wide and confusing our customer?
I don't think so. Because I think people are starting to learn, and as they learn about spirits, they're starting to realize that, especially in the whiskey categories, that there is tremendous amounts of flavor out there. Mm-hmm. And I think the more we can debunk the myths about Irish whiskey, the better. All Irish whiskey is triple distilled. No, it's not. Irish whiskey can't be peated. Of course it can. I think these are elements
that historically.
Yeah, it was historically. So we need to you kind of elevate the category through the diversity of the category. And I think that's something where people, they either see Scotch is generally known as peated because of the majority of blended Scotch is peated. And, the single malt category as well in Scotland, a lot of people expect them to be peated. And, I've heard people in bars in New York and stuff, drinking Macallan and going, oh, it's so smoky. And they don't realize that it's not peat smoky. It's sherry, it's leather, it's meat. It's not smokiness. So, but they've kind of almost been pigeonholed into this smoky style of whiskey, where I really do think the opportunity for Irish whiskey is that kind of diversity of flavor, and the more styles of flavor that we can have, the better.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of people doing peated pot still as well, peated double distilled pot still, which would be amazing.
I think the opportunities are endless there. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, let's go on. You mentioned there that the consumer won't be overawed. How has the consumer changed? Obviously, from my side, I see the consumer has been far more knowledgeable than they used to be, and far more interested in the provenance of the whiskey and the details about it. What are you seeing?
I think you're right in a way. There's a certain consumer now that didn't really exist kind of 8 or 10 years ago, and you were one of them. You were one of the the earlier people who was into whiskey and into kind of the knowledge and learning how it was crafted and gathering as much knowledge as you could. But like in Ireland, 10, 15 years ago, if you were into it, you kind of knew everybody that was into it. Yeah. Where now you're looking at Facebook forums, you're looking at channels like this, opportunities like this, and you're seeing like hundreds and hundreds, possibly thousands of people conversing over whiskey, and that's amazing. So there's certainly more people kind of interested in it. consumers in general are becoming more discerning. You know, the availability of information to your hand now is just, you know, you can learn about something immediately because of Google and, you know, smartphones, and it makes people naturally more inquisitive. But I think the wider audience for Irish whiskey, you talk about 12 million cases last year. You know, 9.8 million was Jameson, 9 million odd were Jameson, 1.8 million were Tullamore Dew. There was about 500,000 or 600,000 Bushmills, and then the rest. Like, if you consider that there's over 11 million cases there, that is just blended Irish whiskey. A lot of it consumed as, you know, knockbacks, shots or whatever. We still have a ways to go for the consumer within Irish whiskey, but certainly within the domestic market, people are getting more clued in, and it's great because we're seeing the sales of premium whiskey go up and up.
Yeah, so people are drinking. I think people are consuming, or certainly the younger generation. So we talk about the demographics of the drinker. So they're becoming a younger audience, a more discerning audience, and more women being involved as well.
Yeah, like I think there's certainly more young people drinking whiskey. Jameson and Ginger has done a lot for that in terms of, you know, that Seamus Lowry, I tell you, that Jameson and Ginger was put on the table as a kind of brand strategy, a key signature serve almost 20 years ago in Irish distillers. But it actually only kind of hit fruition and really, you know, catapulted about 6-7 years ago. And, you know, that's invited a lot of new consumers. I'm a massive advocate for the Irish coffee. I think, you know, Irish coffee is such a great drink. It's something that every bar in the world should serve. And any bar that has any kind of an inclination to Ireland should be serving an Irish coffee. And if you like coffee, chances are you might like an Irish coffee. And that's converting people to whiskey drinkers as well. But in terms of the demographic, yeah, I think there's certainly more younger people getting into it. People are starting to treat it with a little bit more respect, which is, you know, it's instigating conversation, and it's getting people wanting to kind of pass their knowledge on. And when people are learning about whiskey through platforms like this, or doing courses, or you know, just tasting in, you know, the variety of online tastings nowadays, obviously, but going to tastings, they're always willing to pass on that knowledge, and that's inviting more and more people into the whiskey category. In terms of kind of, I suppose, from put my marketing hat on, I don't think brands need to be too worried about engaging with, you know, I suppose you do want to engage with younger people and ensure that you're appealing to younger people, but gender isn't a thing as far as I'm concerned in kind of whiskey marketing. It's not about, you know, inviting more women to drink whiskey, or, you know, inviting more people from different, you know, backgrounds to whiskey. It's about creating a safe environment for people to enjoy whiskey, everybody. And that's what we should be doing as a kind of brands, and also the hospitality industry. There's a lot of responsibility there as well, and hopefully the hospitality industry gets to open again very, very soon. But, you know, inviting more and more people to enjoy the drinks that they want to enjoy, regardless of their gender.
Yeah, and obviously we've seen some disastrous marketing campaigns where women were targeted, you know, and you know, I think the last thing women, and I'm speaking as a man, obviously it's different, but I mean, the last thing women want is to be necessarily treated differently. You know, they want to be treated as equals and as peers in the whiskey environment.
Yeah, I can't speak for women.
No.
But again, I'll just reiterate that point. You know, when you're marketing, or when you're hosting tastings, or when you're, you know, doing events, it's just about creating you know, an enjoyable environment for everybody that's there, and hopefully more and more women get involved, and that's great. But, you know, we're seeing a lot of female leaders come into the industry now as well, which there's no doubt about it, that there wasn't many women kind of, you know, I suppose public facing women in the industry go back 10 years, especially in Irish whiskey. But we're seeing many talents come through the ranks from a kind of younger demographic perspective in the Irish whiskey industry. But we're also seeing some true kind of leaders at the top ranks as well, which is amazing. So it's not about the fact that they're women. It's about these people are so impressive. Their skill sets and their CVs are absolutely amazing, and the way they engage with people is impressive. So it's great.
But it's great that they're getting
such diversity.
Yeah, no, it's great to see that the playing field has been equalized, and I still think there's a little bit to go, but we'll get there. But I guess you mentioned there delivery of whiskey and the Irish coffee. One trend that I do see emerging is the use of Irish whiskey in cocktails.
Yeah,
and I know this is one area that you're really strong and a proponent of. You want to tell us, what do you see happening in the cocktail scene? I mean, it's no longer just the Irish coffee or the Manhattan or whatever, or not Manhattan. But
well, in the cocktail scene, I think it's good that we have a signature drink like the Irish coffee, which is a cocktail. And it's great that we have something that we can wholly own, and it's something that we should be, celebrating even more so. But in terms of the kind of wider cocktail scene, we're seeing now, several influencers kind of come into it and really start to champion Irish whiskey, none more so than the Dead Rabbit in New York with Sean and Jack and Gillian Vos, the beverage director there. They're writing a book on Irish whiskey cocktails at the minute called Paddy Drinks. I know it's nearly finished. We might see it this year, which is over 150 unique cocktail recipes about Irish whiskey. We're seeing guys like Aaron Wall and Kieran Smith with the Homeboy bars in London that are very much championing Irish whiskey and the Irish whiskey cocktails. And then, like Brian's saying there, we have Dave Mulligan in Bar 1661 here in Dublin that is just championing Irish spirits in cocktails, which is amazing. And they are very much the standout cocktail bar in Dublin at the minute. But then you have bars like, say, the Bank of College Green, which is a bar I used to work with through the Chalk Group, where David would offer every one of his cocktails would have an Irish equivalent. So if he does an old fashioned, he does it with the best bourbon he can buy, but he also offers it with an Irish whiskey. So it could be Teeling, or it could be something else. And I think there's a level of responsibility there that we especially in Ireland, we need to champion Irish drinks as well. But I think, to be honest, within cocktails, and we have a cocktail booklet through the Depth and Diversity campaign at Drinks Ireland, and if anybody wants it, reach out to me and I'll send them a PDF of it. But it breaks cocktails down into coffee cocktails, stir drinks, sour drinks, shaken drinks, and then it does highballs. And I really think, and I mean this wholeheartedly, I think highballs are the future of cocktails for whiskey brands, and that's not just Irish whiskey, but whiskey brands as a whole. Right. And I think highball cocktails, they're sessionable. Anybody that doesn't know what a highball essentially is whiskey and soda water. That's basically, in its most basic form, whiskey and ginger ale. That's a highball cocktail. Something that's really, really simple. 3-4 ingredients max that can be made in a glass, quickly stirred and served out. There's Powers are doing a great drink, the honey highball, where it's 10 mils of honey syrup, a measure of Irish whiskey, and topped with soda. Give it a quick stir, serve it with a slice of lemon. It's fantastic.
What do you make of these pre-made cocktails then that you do see?
I think, pre-made cocktails are amazing, and I'd say that the craft cocktail company, Dave Mulligan's brand, it's great to see more cocktails getting into people's homes. Simon King in the 12 Hotel does some absolutely amazing cocktails with Irish spirits in his brown bag cocktails. You can go on the 12 Hotel's website and get them. Again, outstanding Irish cocktails delivered to your door, which is amazing in Ireland. But again, I think from an entree perspective, I think the bars and anybody that wants to serve a cocktail or kind of figure out a new way to serve Irish whiskey, it's very much highballs are the way forward. You could have literally a bottle of kind of sugar syrup, a bottle of lemon juice, and a bottle of honey syrup, and you can make 4 or 5 different drinks and a couple of dashes of bitters, and really, really sessionable drinks, which is great.
Yeah. I was talking about pubs. Obviously, the pubs have really suffered an awful lot. And, prior to lockdown, I think we were starting to see your standard bar starting to open an awful lot of whiskies as well. Is that something that you see being a standard thing going forward?
Possibly. I do think bars as a whole are starting to kind of offer more in their range. If you look at the kind of even the Irish Whiskey Awards and the amount of Irish whiskey bars that are involved, I really do think Willie Ahern and the Palace kind of set a a real kind of precedence when he decided he was going to become, an Irish whiskey bar. And he tells a great story about being in a bar in Scotland and asking for an Irish whiskey, and then them telling
Yeah.
him they had a bottle, but they were like, "Why would we serve you Irish whiskey? You're in Scotland."
Exactly.
And that kind of pride that they had is amazing. And he's really championed the category, and he's a great influencer. And I think, like, I didn't say anything about it, people that have influenced me at all, but Willie and David Chalk, and more recently Alan Campbell, who owns the Bankers Bar in Dublin, an ex-LVA chairman. I converse with those guys quite a lot. I probably wish I did more, but the way they look at Irish hospitality and the way they see kind of the development of their ranges and the kind of how Irish whiskey and Irish spirits kind of are fitting into their ranges is influencing the wider publicans across Dublin. And then, that's spreading out from there. And then you have leaders in each city. So you have the Paul Garvins in Galway, you have Mannion with Sonny Malloy's. Noctons were the first whiskey bar in Galway. They were selling whiskey before everybody else, but they never kind of elevated it. But still a great place to go and get great value. Then you have like in Cork, you have the Shelburne Bar now, and then you have people like Willie Jack and the Duke of York in Belfast that really are just showcasing Irish whiskey as a whole. But I think the more areas that pubs, bars, restaurants, hotels can find ways of I suppose elevating the customer experience through creative drinks and through creative ways to use Irish spirits, that's what's really going to start to set us apart. And the Irish hospitality industry is unmatched, it's unparalleled, but we still can bring it to a new level, and it's going to be people like Willie, like Dave, like Paul, like Willie Jack, Paul Cunningham down in the Thomas Connolly in Sligo, people like that are very much going to influence their area, and the wider pubs will improve because of it. But Irish whiskey is certainly a thing that I think you'd be mad not to be looking at it.
Yeah. Tell me, with COVID having an influence on the whole trade and the whole, obviously there's no on-trade, and tell me, do you think that the effects of COVID will remain even after COVID goes away?
Well, if the vaccination thing goes and everybody gets vaccinated, as hopefully the world will, then I hope things can kind of go back to a little bit of normality. But there's certain areas that I suppose bars, when they could open bars serving food, that they had to kind of focus on that are going to be better for the industry. Table service, the really honing in on the customer experience and the flow of rooms and making it ease of access for the customer to have a great experience, and really, thinking much more about what the consumer is doing rather than what's going into the till. Those kind of habits are going to make a big difference going forward. There's no doubt that the hospitality industry has been just left idling, and it's absolutely atrocious, kind of the way they're being treated. There's no doubt about that. It's actually harrowing how they've been treated. And I hope that when they are given a roadmap or a plan for reopening, that's followed with great support, and that they're given every I suppose pedestal that they can to really kind of elevate themselves. But I hope then that the trade as well is planning for when they do get to reopen. There'll obviously be a high turnover of staff. People will have found other jobs. It could be new people coming through. So I hope that they're looking at their reopening plans. They're looking at their education strategies. They're looking at their customer service levels. They're looking at their customer journey. They're looking at Dave Chalk used to say food, drink, service, and atmosphere. How can we make all those four things better? Because if you're not thinking about that now while you're closed, as hard as it might be, you need a plan to come back with a bang. Unfortunately, a lot of places won't open again. There's no doubt about that. But we're all hoping that the majority of them will.
Okay. In terms of new releases, let's talk about new releases. And I suppose, obviously, there's a huge number of new releases. There's a large number of independent bottlers out there. But one thing I am seeing a trend for, and, there have been crusades for, one is cask strength, another is limited edition, and another is single cask. So let's talk about those for a start. This the cask strength crusade in terms of people yearning for higher strength alcohol. Where do you see that going? That's definitely something that's been on the increase.
It's certainly something that's been on the increase, and again, I think it's a good area to kind of diversify. I don't think it's necessary. Like, I don't think you as a brand need to be planning for a cask strength release, because they're certainly not for everybody. It's a very kind of you're satisfying one kind of group of people, and it's discerning whiskey drinkers, and they want to try a cask strength, and they have every right to want to try a cask strength. And I think it's a very unique way of engaging with people. But I do think you mentioned limited there. I think it's something that works well in a kind of limited capacity. So doing a couple of 100 bottles at cask strength is a great thing to kind of satisfy the people that want to see something at cask strength. I think Redbreast have proved that there's certainly an appetite out there for cask strength releases in a kind of wider audience, but you need the audience.
Yeah,
you can't.
Is it good for the audience? Because I mean, my argument would be yes, it's very good for a very small minority group who, they want to be able to. And the argument is they want to be able to control the level at which they drink alcohol. And I don't buy that argument myself, because drinking anything, 46% is enough. I mean, the top blenders are drinking it at 30% so that they get the max flavor out of it. What is the fascination with cask strength?
Yeah, I think it's people, once you get used to cask strength and you've learned how to kind of, I suppose, treat spirits, and you've drank a lot of them, then there is a certain kind of sensory, I suppose, sensation that comes along with drinking cask strength whiskey, where you get big flavors. It's robust. It's not aggressive is the wrong word, but you're getting a lot more is going to happen within your nose and your palate when you're drinking alcohol of that level, and it's because it's so high in alcohol. Now, some people might say that they're some whiskeys drink absolutely incredibly at cask strength, and yeah, some whiskeys do, but would they still drink absolutely incredibly at 46%? Absolutely, and it's. I kind of agree with you in a way. I do.
Well, there are pros and cons, I think, to it. There's definitely pros and cons. I mean,
go on. Yeah.
Sorry, I mean, putting the power in the consumer is a great thing, but again, the misnomer, and what I feel sorry for is actually the new distilleries and the smaller ones being under pressure to release a cask strength when, in one sense they can alienate a customer. I mean, you're not going to get the same flavor profile as you would if you were drinking it at below 40%. Let's face it.
I think some brands are doing it in a really unique way. The Sleeve League are doing it. Dunville's are doing it, where they're releasing a lot of their cask strength whiskies as a direct consumer play. And when you talk about emerging markets within Irish whiskey, you have obviously countries. You have, Asia's an emerging market, Africa's an emerging market, but the e-commerce platform is the biggest emerging market that there is.
Sure.
But playing direct to consumer, so when you're selling direct from your own website or your own distillery to the consumer themselves, is a kind of perfect place to satisfy the cask strength consumer. Because they can deal direct with you. You put it up on your website. You do your limited release, and they can choose to buy it, and they can get it there. And you don't have to go through the rigmarole of trying to get it listed in shops. You don't have to go out and try and make a play for cask strength whiskey.
Yeah. I mean, the other advantage.
There seems to be a market for that right now.
Yeah.
But will that continue? Yeah.
No, I mean, there definitely is a market for it, and I'm not against it or I'm not for it either. Like, I mean, I think on the one side, it has the danger of putting an awful lot of pressure on the industry itself. It has the potential to alienate some people that might be new to whiskey. And on the other side, it gives more control to the consumer, and they feel they're getting something more premium. But then at the other side, the price is affected as well.
Yeah, well, from an Irish perspective, the price is affected immensely because of our duty rates.
Yeah.
But elsewhere around the world, that's not as much of a concern. But I think it's something that I think as a smaller brand, you shouldn't be too worried about. And don't worry about satisfying everybody. Just worry about creating a really good brand and a really, really good product. It's all about the taste. You need to create a great liquid and get it out there. Once you have established your brand and you have an established play, then it makes sense to maybe create a mainstream cask strength when you have consumers. You're doing tens of thousands of cases, and that they're going to resonate with something new, and you have kind of discerning drinkers looking at it. But for smaller brands, I have to say, I think it's a good idea to do small releases and play them as a direct to consumer play, and give the people that want an opportunity to try them at cask strength an opportunity to do it, but maybe not. Don't get 1,000 bottles done. Maybe keep it quite small.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned there the premiumization of Irish whiskey, and I think that's definitely been identified as a growth area. And it was one thing I think that Irish whiskey wasn't associated with was premium. And look, if you look at some of the super premium releases with huge prices, you can see that Irish whiskey is being regarded. Or that sort of product release helps put Irish whiskey into the super premium and premium league. What do you reckon with all this premiumization?
I think it's great. I think it's great that Irish whiskey is now starting to play in a kind of higher echelon. And there's certainly an appetite out there for it. I'm just finished a little dram, but just after finishing a dram of it was Dunville's Pala Cortado finish. It was cask 1203, so I think that was one of the ones from last year. 18-year-old bottle of 55%. It's a really good example of I think that was 200 or possibly more. Could have been closer to €500 a bottle, and people ate them up. They sold out in minutes, and it shows that people are willing to pay for exceptional products, and they're exceptionally packaged products as well. But you look at what Middleton have done over the last couple of years, there's no doubt about it. Middleton are the only brand probably in Ireland right now that can say that they're luxury. And they did the revamp. A lot of people didn't like it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I think that's what Irish whiskey needs to start gaining a little bit of interest from that type of consumer. The Silent Distillery release is a great example. €45,000 a bottle, and it sold out before it was released. And it might only been 100 bottles, but there's certainly people out there that want these types of liquid, and it'll get them into markets that are playing in those ways. You look at Scotch, you look at Macallan, you look at Dalmore, you look at Glenturret have just turned themselves around into a luxury brand. It's amazing. You look at the bottlings like say Gordon MacPhail do, £70,000 a bottle on release. And people are buying them. It's incredible.
Who are the buyers for these products? I mean, who's buying them?
Very, very rich people.
Asia.
These
are collectors.
Asia seems to be a huge market, and there's certainly an element of collecting, but there's an element of showmanship there as well, where you're talking Asian billionaires that are actually drinking these products, which is amazing. Absolutely great to see, because I like to think that if I was a billionaire and €75,000 wasn't going to make a difference to me at all, that I would drink something like that. We're seeing JJ Corey did their chosen release around €7,000 bottle. Teeling are doing these kind of luxury bottles as well now, up to kind of 5,000 and 7,000. I think the one thing I would have there is there's just so much Teeling, and it's hard to kind of put your finger on it. Where it's what Jameson have and what Middleton have is Middleton is now the luxury product, and it's going to be the luxury product, and the other brands, Redbreast and the Spot Whiskies and Powers and all, are all separate to that, and I think that's a very strong play. But that's kind of luxury. But in the premium sector, it's how do you define premium? There's premium, super premium, ultra premium. I don't understand any of those terms. I think there's more and more people now drinking whiskey between kind of 35 and €50 than there ever was. And that for me is kind of a premium play. And that's the most exciting area in Irish whiskey at the minute. between 50 and €100, obviously there's absolutely phenomenal products in there. I think there's a gap between 100 and €200 right now, or maybe 100 and 150, where there's a gap there for a product that could be absolutely outstanding. But I'd like to see a high age statement on it, and I'd like to see, something unique about it. Or
well, there are a couple there playing between the 100 and the 200 mark. Not many, as you said, though, not many.
But it's certainly an area that there's room for development in. But I do think if Irish whiskey wants to contend with Scotch, we do need to be creating these types of products. And in terms of premiumization, Bushmills is the sleeping giant. Bushmills is the one that have it all in their back pocket. And as Seamus said last week, they might be slow. They're not a reactive company. They wait and they play their game, and the Causeway collection is going really well. They just released another one in Ireland today, a cognac cask, and they did the 1995, which I gave a 9 on Malt Review, and I just love that whiskey. And Stephen McGuinness, who's one of my best mates, disagrees with me entirely, and I think it's great that we can.
Well, a 9 from you is pretty strong.
We can disagree on stuff, but they're a distillery that has 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old liquid in the distillery. I know they have casks over 75 years old in there.
Yeah.
They can do it. And I expect them to.
Yeah. There are certainly a lot of browns out there. I mean, you touched on the fact that you thought perhaps Teeling were doing too many. On the other side, I don't think there's a company that has shown the diversity of the cask finishes like Teeling.
Teeling, sorry, I might have come across a bit negative, maybe. Teeling are one of the best things that's happened to Irish whiskey in terms of their brand. They have kind of changed the way you can build a brand in terms of, focusing on that core Trinity range, really engaging with the cocktail community globally, getting some really good people involved with their brand development, and then satisfying all sorts of price points through their products. They had Teeling 21 and 26 and 30. I don't know if you remember the Teeling 26-year-old, the Gold Reserve.
I do remember it. Yeah.
It was finished in white Burgundy cask, and it was absolutely incredible. Now, all they did was finish the whiskey, I suppose, in a way, but they got it out there. They charged €500 for it. I remember Stephen in the Celtic Whiskey Shop selling, I think it was 53 bottles of that to one company in Asia. And in one sale, or it might have been 33, but he if you ask him, he'll say 50.
Yeah, of course he will. He'll say 150.
But that was a consumer that came in looking for a luxury product. They wanted to gift it for Christmas. They were going to be sent to Hong Kong, and there was nothing else that kind of satisfied that price point at the time.
No, it was in a price point, and it was very well packaged, and it was very well presented, and there was a great buzz about Teeling at the time. Still is.
Yeah, and there still is, and like they did that. Another thing about premiumization, actually, and I didn't touch on it last when you asked about casks or single casks.
Yes, we
used to get redbreast single casks in the Celtic Whiskey Shop with 500 bottles that would take not months, would take a full year to sell.
Yeah,
and we were getting Middleton single casks that would take 6 months to sell. We were getting single pot still single casks, rum cask, fully matured in rum, €220, and it was taken. Well, actually, that sold out in about, I think, 6 weeks or 8 weeks. But if you release those whiskies today, like imagine a single pot still rum cask, fully matured in rum, and I think it was 16 years old. If you put €500 on it, it would sell out in 10 minutes. Yeah. Redbreast 10 last week, 7,000 bottles for €100, €700,000 in sales in a matter of hours. Like €700,000 in sales for a company like Mickle or a company like, I'm sure, Sleeve
that's a year's
Killowen. A year.
Yeah, I know you. Well, that's up to you now to drive those sales. No pressure, but
I got enough of the Redbreast 10. I'll make a few pound off it.
Let's talk about pricing then. Obviously, prices have increased to some extent in Ireland, anyway. Is it out of the reach of many?
In what sense? What price? Well, do you think it's getting too high? Is it? Or
yeah. I mean, are we getting what we pay for?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think we are in certain senses, and then we're not in others. So we're getting independent bottlings coming out from guys that are doing really kind of cool things, but they're coming out at, say, 80, 90 euro for a limited edition, €100, maybe more. And it's so hard as a consumer to go, yeah, I'm going to spend my money on that. You want the liquid to be absolutely incredible for that price point.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It's a tough game to play, and I don't see it as a long-term play. I think it's something that's not, as time goes forward, that you might get priced out.
Yeah.
I don't think
a business can build its success solely on these limited editions.
Yeah. I think you need a kind of core product that everybody can relate to. A 40 to 60 euro or a 30 to 50 euro product that people can go out and buy and enjoy on the regular, whether it be once a month if they really like the product or more. In the lower end, we have some absolutely incredible whiskies under the 30 euro marker. There's no doubt about that. But that again, I think that 40 to 60 euro that's that very exciting place. But again, what you're getting in there as well is kind of up for debate in what's good value and what's not good value. It's hard. It's very, very hard to say. But then you get certain whiskies like what Dunville's are doing, where you're getting a 12-year-old, say, cask strength for £125, and if you said that to somebody in Scotland, they would fall off their chair. Paying that kind of money for a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
But my thing to them would be, take any of those Dunville's PX 12-year-old cask strengths and put it in a lineup with anything in Scotland for £125, and it'll beat it, probably. They're just outstanding whiskies. And Redbreast 10 at 100, 10-year-old whiskey for €100. I think that whiskey is absolutely incredible. Some of Dahi's releases, sometimes people say they're quite expensive, but like that 18-year-old PX finish was absolutely outstanding. So if you're, the thing is, you get good quality whiskey liquid first and foremost, and you put it in really, really good casks. Cask management is as important, more important now than it ever was. But you need to get really, really good casks. And not failing that, but if you're going to play in kind of competitive markets, so I reckon you like that 50 euro marker is that kind of competitor place. You want to have a really, unique flavor profile. And how do you do that? Well, really, if you're an independent bottler, you just have to play around with casks. You have to rely on sensory analysis. You have to try and do things differently. Take risks. Which is very hard to do because the whiskey industry, there's very little money in selling whiskey.
Well, the other side of it is, you mentioned there independent bottlers, and independent bottlers obviously is a big increase in the number of them, and we do need them as part of the industry to bring perhaps new audiences in and bring a little bit of diversity. But do you see their role as being critical?
Yes. Absolutely.
And does a consumer think that an independent bottled product is inferior to a distilled somebody with their own distillery? Is that misnomer out there?
I don't know. I don't know if enough people realize that an independent bottling is an independent bottling, which is an issue, and there's a transparency issue there. And it's something where people need to be more transparent about that fact. But I think if you're being transparent, like it provides such, and I keep saying this word diversity, but it provides such breadth to the industry. And now we were, there was a stage there maybe about 6 or 7 years ago where I'm sure you've heard the phrase before, but copy and paste coolie, where there was just copy and paste coolie. It was 10-year-old and 12-year-old bourbon cask matured coolie, and it all smelled like warm hot water bottles, and it was just as boring as God forbid. Good whiskies, but just they were all the same. But now we're seeing much more creativeness. The opportunity for Irish whiskey to use wood, I hope, will drive more kind of wood finishes, acacia, cherry, method madness.
Yeah, so we're seeing that as another trend. We're seeing that as another trend in unusual casks.
Yeah, I hope that more companies start to play in that way. and listen to consumers as well. Listen to the people that are drinking your products, and try and figure it out. Do things that are a little bit different, and go there. But like, I think, us at Mickle, myself and Porrick and Ross and Jimmy are talking every day about what types of casks we can use to lay down our spirit in house, and even in our independent bottlings. Like, how can we create flavor profiles that are going to surprise people? How
Well,
can
that's the other thing.
that we can set ourselves apart? And now it might be a factor that maybe we'll probably get it wrong at times, and we'll have to go, well, we can't release that.
Yeah, of course,
What are we
yeah.
what are we gonna do? But so far so good. We're having we're having great fun, kind of doing that flavor development, and I think that's the way brands should approach things. Don't look at what's available from a baseline.
Yeah.
And if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. Go and do it. You can still create great whiskies. There's some great sources out there, but really look at how you can create something that's different. And that's not, let's go buy a Madeira barrel, or let's just do an Oloroso sherry finish. It's about finding different flavor components and trying to make them work together.
Yeah. Is there a lot of pressure out there for people to be different?
I think from a smaller brand perspective, possibly, because you need to find a way of making yourself unique, and it's tough to make yourself unique when the big boys are so big.
Yeah.
And
but to be different and good, that surely is that's the challenge.
Yeah, well, that is the challenge, Sergius, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. Be good.
Yeah.
As long as the liquid in the bottle is good, you stand a chance.
Yeah.
And I keep saying this. I still talk to a lot of people, independent bottlers, a lot of guys that are at early stages of their journeys, and I keep saying to them, make sure the liquid is good. Make sure the liquid is good. And it's something that we're very focused on as well. And I've always been focused on, ask as many people as you can. Invite people that you trust to try your liquids. The Irish whiskey industry as a whole actually is incredibly collaborative. And people, I mean, from the big boys, from Middleton and Irish Distillers to Bushmills, to the smaller guys like James and like ourselves and Dingle and Teeling even. But you can get a lot of advice very, very quickly, and you can pick up the phone to so many people now and find out what's going on, which is great.
Okay, we've got a question in there. A couple of questions in there, if you don't mind. So a friend in Greece, hi John, he's asking, is there an overall Irish whiskey strategy on how to take advantage of the momentum? Is it pricing and positioning on premium category, or you will also differentiate with the wood and finishing?
I think
or both.
It's almost both. Yeah, is there a strategy? I don't know. Is there a strategy? Everybody has their own kind of strategy. Right now, as from a kind of IWA perspective, the Irish Whiskey Association, it's very much about getting consumers to understand the diversity that is in Irish whiskey and getting people to start to engage with Irish whiskey in different ways. And that will help the category drive forward. Premium products is certainly a thing you need to play. And it's not that you need to play, but there's a lot of room in the premium space. And, online's a huge factor in this now, because people can kind of buy and have it delivered to their door, and it's becoming such a thing of norm now. So, you can pay €40, €50, €60, €70, get a whiskey delivered to the door. It's so painless. It's amazing. And that's going to drive premiumization. But wood casks and finishing and stuff is something that I think we're only at the early stages of that development. And some people would criticize it and say, well, sure, everybody's doing wood finishes. But there's still a lot of room there for scope. The problem for us consumers is too many great releases, and we can't buy them all. Well, the best thing, the best thing about that is that Jonathan reckons there's too many great releases. So that means that the industry as a whole is doing well. We can't buy them all as a factor when people, especially. I feel like it's collectors that tend to give out sometimes, where there's too many Redbreast single casks, or there's too many Powers single casks, and we can't keep up, or there's too many Waterfords, and it's hard. But I believe that people are only releasing more liquid when their other liquid is gone.
Yeah.
So
well, one of the amazing psychological studies that was ever done was one that, if you give, and it was noted actually in pension plans, they did. So you offer a person a pension plan of maybe 3 different options, and the person would choose a pension plan, but you put 20 or 30 pension options in front of them, they'll end up choosing none. They'll become overwhelmed and they won't be satisfied with what they've chosen. Is there a danger of that happening in Irish whiskey?
Possibly. Is it? People are going to be overwhelmed by the category, maybe. But education plays a huge role in this, and the responsibility in education lies with, I suppose, the brand owners and the shop owners and the bartenders and the wider industry to build strategies that give people access to the information that they want and give them opportunities to learn about all the different brands that are out there from an unbranded perspective, and be able to pass on that information. And
I think for the enthusiasts.
I think just to finish on that point, I think when I used to work in the bars, I worked in Garvin's, and I also actually used to work upstairs in the Palace for Willie when I worked in the Celtic whiskey shop. And a big thing, the thing that kind of helped me and kind of I suppose it's one of the reasons why a lot of people speak so highly of me, is because I never kind of made recommendations. My thing was, what do you recommend? Well, my retort was always, well, what do you normally drink?
Yeah,
and it could be Scotch or it could be Irish or it could be whatever. And I said, well, what do you like about that? Is it that it's sweet, or is it that it's sherried, or what? And and then start to build a roadmap or a spider's web, as I used to call it, of the 200 whiskies that are behind me, for them to engage with and to start to try whiskies that they could really resonate with them. But now, I had a level of knowledge that was way beyond the bar trade at the time. But I do think that's something that people have to, bar owners and shop owners and anybody have to aspire to, of trying to.
But it's part of the excitement as well,
Yeah,
it's a question of, to some extent, trying to find the gem that's out there, because there are so many. It's trying to find something that is really challenging. But there on the other side, I can see it from both sides, because. You go abroad and you say, somebody says, I want to try an Irish whiskey. We can no longer define Irish whiskey in one pigeonhole, So it makes it a little bit more challenging to give that communication. So that's where training is important. And that's where providing great messages to the consumer is important. And I think, look, the brands that are out there and is well established in the US have done a fantastic job of doing that. And, obviously there's the challenge of trying to push further the postil, I suppose, and the premium products. But my one concern would be, let's not overwhelm the consumer.
Yeah, and I get your point there, but I think the more information that becomes readily available, the better it's going to be. And I think if Scotch hasn't overwhelmed the consumer, then we've a long way to go.
Yeah.
When I started the book project,
yeah,
my whole thing was that there's not an Irish whiskey book out there that really kind of feeds into, I suppose, the education of the bartender, but also gives consumers a kind of, I suppose, a platform where they can learn about all Irish whiskey. Yeah. Peter Mulryan has an amazing book on the history of Irish whiskey, absolutely amazing. Whiskies of Ireland, and Fionnan's book on pot still. If you ever have met Fionnan or heard him speak, you can actually hear his voice. Yeah. When you're reading the words, and I don't know if that's a good thing.
I think he's on here, so be careful.
And I would say that to him because I love him, and it's what he's doing for Irish whiskey is incredible. But when I set out kind of writing the book, and it's not finished, and I don't know if it ever will get finished. But the idea was, give people a platform where they can just go and read about and learn about the wider kind of Irish whiskey, all the distilleries that are out there, and really get in-depth knowledge about the flavor creation, how people, the opportunities that are almost there in flavor creation. Now all I have to do is find somebody to pay to get it published, and we'll be sorted.
I don't know anybody that does any print publishing at all, but listen now. You mentioned Fionnan there, and you mentioned the premiumization of whiskey, but other grains, the use of other grains in Irish whiskey, and specifically, of course, I'm talking about using oats, rye, and wheat. Well, primarily those. Is that a trend that's emerging now, and is it something that's got growth in it?
Well, it's certainly emerging, and there's certainly growth in it. And when so as many people will know, and some people might not know, the Irish Whiskey Association, the kind of lobbying body for its members, have reopened the technical file and are creating a submission for amendments to the technical file on Irish whiskey. Now, the technical file is the thing that kind of governs the GI, which means if you follow these rules, you anywhere that recognizes the geographical indication for Irish whiskey, you can sell your products there, labeled as they are, single pot still or malt or whatever it is. And pot still, up until this point, can only contain 5% other grains, and that's been a real bitter point for a lot of the new players in the industry and some of the old players as well. And Fionn has absolutely championed this. The members were invited to make submissions, ourselves, Michael included. We joined just before the submissions deadline, and we submitted one. And when I was writing our submission, the first person I rang was Fionn, and he provided me a huge amount of information on historic mash bills and the use of oats, wheat, and rye. So what I can tell you about that is the technical committee are building now their submission, which will go to the Department of Agriculture. Then the Department of Agriculture, the government in Ireland, will have to agree to either all of it, hopefully, and some of it, and then they will put it to the EU, and it's the EU themselves that actually have to change the GA. But they have agreed to put in that 30%, up to 30% other grains will be allowed in pot still, according to the amendments that they're putting forward. So that is agreed at IWA level. But obviously,
I don't know if that's been announced yet, has it, publicly?
I don't think so. I don't really care. But that is going to go to the Department of Agriculture. They will do what they want. There's absolutely no guarantee that will happen. But the technical committee itself has agreed that.
So what's the interest then, as a consumer, from the consumer point of view? Do you see it's the consumer that is looking for these new mash bills and new recipes and the use of other grains?
Well, I think the use of other grains is a great thing, because there's all certain elements there. There's certain elements of flavor that are there to be used, and I suppose when you look back through historic distilling, especially you look at potsheen distillers like Porrick's, I suppose ancestors at Mickle, they would have used whatever grain was readily available. So if there was a bad harvest on barley, you would use oats or wheat or whatever you could get your hands on. And his grandfather Jimmy used to talk about other grains, and he would say that the oats add a little bit of body and a kind of texture to your distillate, but they wouldn't give the same yield as barley. Wheat is always quite light and quite silky, and if anybody's tried the kind of wheated bourbons from Buffalo Trace, like
quite fruity,
they can create incredible distillates. And then rye would always be traditionally spicy, but the problem with rye was it could tend to burn the pot on you. So it was tough to work with. And you see that in Fionn's research. You see that it was generally oats that would be. Oats would actually be the kind of one that was leaned on heaviest. You would use wheat in smaller varieties and rye in much smaller varieties. I see Stephen has more coming in there.
Somebody, what's Steve? Yeah, Stephen. Yeah, I mean, it's a valid point. And look, we'll see what comes out of it. But look, if it's consumer driven and consumers are interested in new variations, then I suppose the big question was they could always be called Irish whiskey. The fact that they can be called pot still.
It allows the pot still category to be true to its history, as Stephen has pointed out there. And which is great, because obviously with historic precedents, which there's fucking loads of, you should be able to create those whiskies, which is amazing. But it gives the pot still category a certain amount of weight. And the weight there in terms of being able to be as different as possible is going to be a good thing in the long run.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, we've seen quite a few releases out, maybe in the last 3 or 4 years, that did have those other grains in them. So I think you had the Drumshanbo. I know there's a couple in there from Kilbeggan as well, Kilbeggan Rye and so forth.
The Kilbeggan single pot still with the 2.5% oats is a bottle that I think everybody should have.
Yeah,
I think it's
which one? The Kilbeggan?
Yeah, Kilbeggan single pot still. It's the red label.
Yeah.
It has 2.5% oats in its mash bill. It's only about 55, 60 euro a bottle. I think it's available in America. It's incredible.
But I mean, you had the Kilbeggan Rye as well. You also had the Drumshanbo pot still had, I think, up to 5% oats in it.
Yeah,
and you can actually really sense that in there. There's a point made there by Kevin saying it must be consumer driven, and I think we touched on people going for different casks. I don't know if you see the same thing, but I'm starting to see a growing interest in port cask finishes as opposed to predominantly would have been mostly sherry. But I'm seeing port and other fortified wines starting to make a bit of a comeback.
Yeah, I suppose maybe a comeback, but they traditionally it was kind of whatever was available in terms of wine casks.
Sure.
I think port casks, they give an interesting flavor. I think just people are looking for different flavors now.
Yeah.
And they're Madeira provides a crisp kind of sweet fruits. Port provides that kind of dates and those darker fruit undertones, which are amazing. Sherry, there's a plethora of sherry. You could use Fino Amontillado, Palo Cortado. You have so many different versions of sherry PX, even Moscatel sherry casks coming through, which is amazing. Red wine is such a big category. You look at Rioja, you look at Ribera del Duero in Spain, you look at Bordeaux, Burgundy. You go to America, the red wine casks they have over there, even Australian red wine. There's so many different possibilities, but a lot of those casks are oak barrels, so they're coming from the same species. So it's Quercus alba, it's Quercus robert, and it's Quercus patria generally. So you're finding those three species. It's really, when people, the big chances and it's only the bigger companies that'll ever be able to do this, but when they take barrels like, I suppose out there oak varieties or wood varieties, say like acacia, and they spend the money to put red wine in it, even though that red wine may never hit the shelf, just to put whiskey in it afterwards. There's a possibility. It's an expensive thing to do, but the big boys might do those things.
Well, the Japanese wood is the one that, I think, is it €1,000 cask?
Yeah, it can be over €1,000. Sherry cask can be up to 800 now. Like if you're talking sherry butts, can be between €800 and €1,200. They can be up to €1,500 as well. Japanese oak can be up to 4,000. Like it just.
It's got that dear, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, if you're looking for a really, really high quality barrel, you're gonna pay for it. That's Mizunara casks, which are Quercus Mongolia, or Mongolian oak, which is again another.
I think Walsh did one in Mizunara and Glendalough as well.
Glendalogh's Mizunara finish is amazing, and it's sure to see more. But
I have to say, I actually preferred I did like the Walsh one. But I mean, they're both fantastic. The price point as well. The price point was great.
The 13-year-old from Glendalough was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I'm delighted for the lads there, like Brian Fagan and the Gallaghers and everybody involved. They're all. I think they've all kind of moved on from Glendalough now. Mark Anthony I've taken over, but they showed that there is truly opportunity for investment in Irish whiskey, and it's something that can be made into a successful business.
Well, then we have Irish Oak, and Liam mentioning, I mean, the Burren Distillery is using Irish Oak. Obviously, you've got Teeling had an Irish Oak release, and then you had the Dargailloch, which is synonymous with the Irish Oak, and they were the first really, I think, to champion that.
I can tell you from experience that Irish Oak is incredibly hard to get your hands on.
I can imagine.
Down in the Burren there, Noel's doing it the right way. He's actually sourcing the trees. But yet then you have to wait 2 years to get the casks. So it's a long road, but there's certainly possibilities there in Irish oak. If anybody has any casks of Irish oak they want to get rid of, phone me up. I'll take them gladly.
Well, I think the Dark Gaelic is the same thing. They've been planning for the last,
Well, I was speaking to Ger Buckley not too long ago about Irish oak, and he said that every Irish oak cask they have produced is still in circulation in Irish distillers, so they're reusing them, which is great.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'm sure there's a few releases coming out in terms of Irish oak soon. I suppose another thing I want to talk to you about then was the yeast is something that hasn't really been talked about, but I'm starting to see the consumer out there starting to talk a little bit about yeast. Is that something that might grow?
I don't think it'll ever be a trend. I think that you're getting into kind of whiskey geek territory now, and it's there's an awful lot of possibility out there with yeast strains, and the different I suppose ester creation, flavor profile, bacteria creation that they can influence. But I think we're as an industry if we're trying to use that as a trend at this point, we're far too soon.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's another thing that can be used.
No,
all right, let's talk about the big one.
Sorry, the yeast thing is something that's definitely distilleries should be exploring, but I think from a consumer perspective, possibly not.
They may not. They're just interested. Yeah. So look, I suppose one question then is, we'll talk about provenance and terroir.
Yeah.
Because that's been a bit of a buzz, and it's certainly something that a lot of brands have pinned their hopes on. What do you make of terroir, and is a consumer still interested, and are they interested to see what's happening?
I think there's a certain consumer that's interested, and I think that there's going to be more consumers interested in terroir. For people that don't know what terroir is, I suppose it's the fact that the land itself actually gives flavour to the grain that's been grown on it, and that grain then will be apparent in the spirit that's produced. Waterford have proved that it's I suppose it's proven that it's there, and it certainly does create different types of spirit. But is it something that the wider consumer is going to grasp onto? I think in the future there's certainly going to be some people that will like to do it, but I don't think it's something that, like, if we look at 38 distilleries in Ireland, I'd be surprised if more than kind of 5 or 6 of them actually go down that kind of route. But there's, like, before Waterford were in Ireland, there was already grain to glass distilleries, growing their own grain.
Absolutely,
Ecklinville have been doing it for years, well,
I mean, I'd argue the big brands as well. They all claim. So the grain to glass is a great story, and I think it does resonate with the consumer. And the consumer has developed and become more sophisticated, and it become more interested in, where did my product come from? And that could be the same for beef. It could be the same for cheeses, and it's certainly coming through now in whiskey. Is it something that makes a difference to the flavor?
I think it does. It does in the spirit, but I'm not convinced when the whiskies become mature, like 5, 6, 7 years old, that anybody's palate will be able to really taste the land of it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the craftsmanship that's going into it. I appreciate what Waterford are doing. But if you look at all the Waterford 1.1 and 1.2 releases, they're incredibly spirit forward.
But they're young.
They're really, really young, and they're you couldn't call them mature spirits in any way or form just yet. And they're expensive, and people are rushing out to buy them, and it seems to be a kind of hot topic in terms of secondary market. I don't know if that's what they intended, but I do think that those whiskies, 15-year-old Waterford could possibly be some of the best whiskey out there. But is it because of the terroir? I don't know. Yeah,
I think it's too early to say really where all that's going to go.
I think it could be because they're putting so much effort into their fermentation. They're putting so much, knowledge into the running. They're still so kind of low and slow, as they say it themselves, that they're sourcing the absolute best wood that they can.
Yeah,
I think that's what's going to make the whiskey amazing in 15 or 20 years' time. Probably not the terroir.
Well, that's the other thing. So yes, I mean, terroir is interesting in the sense that, from my point of view, I see the consumer being interested in terroir, not necessarily because it affects the flavor, My chair where I'm all kind of including provenance. The consumer just has this inquisitiveness and curiosity to know that their product is from wherever, and that sells.
That does sell, and I think rural distilleries especially should be looking at it and seeing, is it feasible? You even just to do a small amount of it, just to have a little bit of whiskey that is grain to glass. Buying a few fields or getting in touch with a few local farmers and producing a small amount of spirit every year that is 100% your own spirit and from that one farm. And the more malt houses that can kind of help, the better. And it's something that I think you'd be mad not to look at. I hear whisperings of Porrick and Jimmy at Mickle looking at land out in Connemara and stuff, and it would be amazing. Who knows what'll happen, but it would be amazing.
Yeah.
So
look, I suppose we're coming close to an end. I just wanted to talk briefly about emerging markets. And obviously the US is Ireland's biggest market for Irish whiskey. There's no doubt about that. I mean, they also had the travel retail, which has been decimated. And today there was a report out saying that Russia has become the second biggest market for Irish whiskey. People are very interested in that. Yeah. What do you identify as the markets where Irish whiskey is starting to be talked about?
Well, as you said there, Russia's becoming a big thing. Like Africa is becoming a big thing, and Asia obviously is something that we can, as an industry, hope to tap into. And because there's such a big market there, there's so many people there, and they consume so much whiskey that it'd be a shame not to be making a play. But for me, it's all about online. On premise, off premise, and no premise is something that I heard. I think it was Louise McGuan say recently about going into every market and looking at on premise, off premise, and then no premise, looking at online sales, looking at direct to consumer, and trying to kind of solve that issue. That's the biggest emerging market. Global travel retail is dead at the minute. That'll come back. It'll be incredibly important in the future. Again, as important, if not more important than it was before. But there's even markets that are maybe established that can be developed even more. So
for sure,
there's still an awful lot of work to do. I'll tell you a trend that I'd like to touch on just before we finish, if you're interested. What I'll ask you a question. What do you think of cask programs?
Well, look, ironically enough, we have a piece coming up on cask programs, and my argument with cask programs, or my interest in them, is if people go in with their eyes open and don't necessarily see it as an investment, I think it's a great thing.
Yes.
And if the cask programs were so fantastically giving a return on the investor, the distilleries would probably keep them and leverage off them with the banks or somebody.
Yeah.
So look, I think it's a great thing that you can actually say you have a cask, you can pass it on to a future generation, you give them as gifts. As a long-term investment, you might hit lucky with one or two of them. They're not but for me, it's the romance of having your own whiskey, and you can go in and try it at its development stages. And I think it's certainly a nice thing to have. But once you can separate it from being an investment.
Yeah, no, that's kind of why I raised it, because it is a hot topic, and Bill and Jan has wrote a great article about investing in whiskey. Cask programs are not an investment. They certainly are not. It's just there's absolutely no guarantee. But with any investment, there's no guarantee as well.
Of course, yeah.
And there's every possibility that you may gain value in the future. But I think they're a tremendous way and vessel to support small distilleries.
Absolutely.
And if you think about it in that sense, where this is a lot of distilleries do it as a way of kind of building some capital so that they can expand or go to new markets or buy new equipment or reach new people. And it's if you find a brand that resonates with you and you want to be a part of their journey, that's what cask programs
I think that's the biggest single thing that they bring. And then the fact that you can gift that, you can produce your own bottles when you want. And actually, there are some distilleries now, and they're offering cask programs with a buyback program at interest on top.
I think that's crazy, to be fair. But I suppose it's a way of guaranteeing you get the money in, and then it's up to you to make the success as the brand owner, and you're obviously very confident of making that success when you're willing to offer an exact premium. But I just think it's a really, I think the more people that are out there talking about them in a way of supporting your kind of local distillery or supporting a brand that you really love and want to be part of their journey, they're not a negative thing, and I see too much negativity around them. There's something that I think is a great vessel for getting people involved in the Irish whiskey industry.
Look, it's great. It's great for, like I said, for the distilleries. It's great for them to be able to showcase it, and it's brand building.
Yeah.
But what I would hate would be that people think it's a surefire investment. And look, we've seen the price of whiskies go up over the last while in terms of the collector market. What do you make of the collector market?
It's great that it's there, and it'll only improve the amount of people that are looking at Irish whiskey. And there's more people looking at Irish whiskey now, even in a domestic perspective, than ever, because there is a secondary market. So it's a necessary evil in a way. I just want to comment. John Quinn commented there again, back on the influences thing. The people like John Quinn, Seamus Lowry, and I suppose Ger Garland and the likes of Shane Fitzharris that used to work with Writers' Tears,
and Ali, I'm sure,
John Cashman, Ali Alpine, these guys that kind of set a standard and set a precedence for what it was to be out in public facing and to be speaking about Irish whiskey. Those are the guys that I think everybody was influenced by, none more so than John Quinn. And seeing the rapport that is possible with consumers at events and now online as well is incredible. And it's great now to see some more talents coming through and starting to make their name. But those guys did a lot.
Yeah. Well, you talk about the diversity there and the breadth that Irish whiskey has, and obviously the REWA are doing a great job in employing great people to show what that diversity is. I think, there's something now for everybody. That's what the exciting thing about Irish whiskey is. And it no longer has to be pigeonholed as an old man's drink that it might have before, or an inferior quality slam drink that it was. It's now something that, if you're willing to make the investment and look into what Irish whiskey can be, the rewards are tremendous. And I think that's what's exciting now.
Yeah, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think it's amazing. The industry's in a really good place, and we're going to see it grow and grow. And there's much more. We were talking about demographics. There's much more demographics now working within the Irish whiskey industry than there ever was.
Sure.
And there's people really starting to come to the fore in kind of younger generations. You look at the likes of, say, Dave McCabe and the Karen Cotters and the younger kind of the apprentices in Middleton. And you look at there's young distillers in Ireland. There's a guy called Dara Smith that used to work with Powerscourt, now works with Boan. Absolutely incredible distilling talent. You look at people like Stephen McGuinness. He might not be that young anymore.
Don't be saying that. He'll come on now and he'll be. No, he's. Yourself and Stephen were very much at the forefront at the begining of, I suppose, the growth.
That wasn't where I was going, but there's people like Stephen that have really. They're bringing a kind of a new level of engagement to it, and he's very much from a sales perspective. You look at Michael Cowman from kind of engaging on social. That man does more social marketing than I've ever thought was capable for somebody, and it's through pure, I suppose, persistence almost, which is incredible. And then you look at like Louise McGuan and her team and JJ Corey, like they're on TikTok. Their way of engaging with consumers through their socials is just incredible. The digitization of branding strategies now is incredible. You look at what Kevin Piggott does with Tullamore Dew. You know, there's a lot of younger talents coming through there now.
This is a trend as well, then, isn't it, Mark? Obviously, the social mediaization, if you like, and the reach, the digital reach that Irish whiskey has, and I think Irish whiskey seems to have done it very well, adapted to the digital platform and social media, perhaps better than any other brands out there.
I think yeah, it's doing well, but it's down to people like yourself providing platforms for people to actually, you know, listen to people and engage with the Irish whiskey community. Barry Chandler's worth a mention as well, obviously, with his Irish Whiskey Fans of America and Stories and Sips. But there's a lot of credit has to be given to this, and you know, I've complimented you before on the obviously the level of guests that you get. I'm incredibly humbled to be on, because you've had some absolutely astonishing guests on and really in-depth conversations, which are great to listen to. And it's platforms like this that are allowing more and more people to kind of engage, and it's all through digital, which is amazing. And you know, like we're very much focused in Michael on, you know, bringing people behind the scenes and talking to us and giving a face to the brand. And you look at the three guys that will appear on screen most. It's myself, like I'm 28, Jimmy's 30, and Porrick's in his early 30s. I'll give him early rather than mid.
He's like myself, so.
But you know, young guys, you know, in a small craft distillery in Galway, you know, making spirit, and it's something that when I started in Irish whiskey didn't exist. So it's pretty.
Has it blown your mind that fact that Irish whiskey, when you started, there was a couple of distilleries, 3, maybe 4. Has it blown your mind that you entered into a market that you could never really have foreseen as having had this growth?
I think I'm still trying to understand Irish whiskey. I think there's an element of the questions tonight that, you know, shows that Irish whiskey is still figuring out what it is and you know, who it is, for lack of a better term. But I don't think anybody could have predicted the growth. And I just hope that it keeps growing, and it's great, and it's interesting. I get to sit at home in the evenings and have a whiskey with Orla, my fiance, and we talk about the notes and you know, we enjoy some great whiskeys, and it's it's a part not just of my daily life, but part of my family life as well. And it's great that I can resonate with something responsibly, of course, but that's something that was created in Ireland, you know.
Well, I suppose out of all the trends that we talked about today, and we talked about an awful lot of them, what do you think is the strongest and the most important trend
in Irish whiskey? I don't know if it's a trend as such, but the fact that more and more people are inviting more and more people to engage with and talk about and try Irish whiskies. The longer we can maintain that momentum, and the more access that we can give people to Irish whiskey knowledge and Irish whiskey advice and Irish whiskey as a whole to try and to buy, the better. But if we keep this kind of camaraderie going, and we keep, you know, gaining more and more advocates, then it's going to come forward. And Stephen says, kind of hit it there, is the people.
Well, it's very much become a community thing now, hasn't it?
The people, the fabric, as they call it sometimes, the more and more people that engage with it and can kind of champion it the way we currently see it online and at home and at events is really what's going to keep the momentum going.
Just one final point there from Paul Slim Nugget Kane. Is the growth a boom? Will the market become oversaturated with distilleries?
There's a possibility that it may well, but I think there's still a little bit of room there.
I mean, crikey! If we even went from less than 1% growth, 1% of the market in Asia to 2%, we'd be wiped out in terms of volume that we could provide.
we were talking to somebody about the Asian market recently, and it was like, you always have to ask the question, like, what kind of volumes do you think we could do in Asia? And they're like, as much as you can make, we can sell.
Oh no! Look, there are independent bottlers out there at the moment that that's their only market is Russia and Asia. They are not, because it's very difficult to compete now in the US.
Yeah, there's still tremendous growth there, but I think we didn't intend to go over an hour and a half, Serge.
No, we didn't. No, we didn't. But look, it was just too interesting, and there's too many things to cover. So I apologize to your missus, firstly, and to yourself. Look, I'm really grateful for you spending the time and sharing your expertise. And look, for such a young man to have the diversity and the breadth of knowledge that you do from any element of the industry, it's been fascinating to talk to, and a real pleasure to have you on. And like I say, I've known you for so long now. It's always good. I consider you a mate. So thank you very much for coming on, and I appreciate it. And
thank you for having me. And obviously, I think Irish Whiskey Magazine is a tremendous thing, and the industry needs it. And we the consumer need to get behind it. And I'm your harshest critic. I'm sure you would tell people that sometimes, but it's really for the betterment of the industry, and we need platforms like this. And this Words on Whiskey has been amazing throughout the pandemic, and I think it's something that
check us in the post.
People have latched onto it, and it's great, So
well, look, I mean, I think tonight in particular, it was nice because we don't often get a chance to get an unbiased view of what's happening out there. And look, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and thanks for drawing the winner as well of our draw. And look, best of luck firstly in your development there with Mickle. I'm sure they're going to do fantastic things out there.
Yeah, well, we've spoke about it a little bit behind the scenes, but we'll hope we have a couple of announcements coming up. I know we've said that we've laid down the most whiskey, and I give a few hints today to things that we're working on. But we certainly have a lot to talk about this year, and I'll hopefully your listeners will get a chance to meet Porrick in the next couple of months. And I look forward to being able to get to Galway. That's what I want. We'll have you in the distillery when we can, but he's the embodiment of all that's good about Irish spirits, and I think you and your listeners will have a great chat with him in the future. But anytime you want to chat, I'm here. Yeah, well, actually, you've always have been, so I appreciate that, Mark. So look, thank you very much, and have a good evening. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that. That was very interesting from my side anyway. And I think we got some great feedback and a great insight there from somebody that has been in the industry for such a long time. And, this is the youth of Irish whiskey, the future of Irish whiskey. And it's really exciting times ahead. And just hope to get to enjoy it all. So thank you very much. Stay safe. Actually, we're going to take a break next week. We're going to take I think our second break for the last 42 or 43 shows. So next week we won't be here, but the following week we will be, and we'll have something very interesting. Thank you very much for joining. Look after yourselves. Stay safe. Happy Easter, and we'll talk to you soon. All the best. Bye-bye.